Good afternoon, everybody. This is Group 5, and today we're going to talk to you about location counters. Location counters, just like program counters, are counters, which essentially means that they're used for keeping track of certain things. And so there are two types of counters. There are location counters and there are program counters. We're going to focus on location counters, but there's not that many differences between them. The only one confusing difference is that the location counter is used by the assembler during the assembly time. So during the time when the assembly translates the code from instructions or binary into hex, so into machine code. Pretty much at the time when you create the object file, the DLX file. Now, program counters are used at a different time. Program counters are used during the execution of the program. So basically, a program counter is a register inside the processor, and that register keeps track of the current instruction that is being executed by the processor. So program counters are used by the processor during execution time. Now, location counter, let's focus on that. Location counter is a thing that keeps track of the current location in memory that is being translated into machine code. So the value of that location, the value of that memory location. Essentially, just like everything in computers, location counter is initialized to 0. So let's say that's the actual counter, and it's initialized to 0. So that's the beginning of the memory. The first memory address is 0. So location counter is initialized to that. Same thing with program counters. Program counters are essentially by default initialized to 0. However, you can still change that initialization by providing certain statements in your program to say start later on or start, jump and stuff. Now, that's one feature that the two counters have in common. Another feature is that both counters increment by 4 because we're in assembly. Hex, with load words, we work with words, so the counters increment by 4. So if we say when the instruction in here is going to be translated into machine code, the value is going to increment by 4 every time. So every time we go to the next step, and to the next one, and then to the next one, it's always going to be plus 4. Same thing works for program counters. Now let's say we have those instructions. That instruction's at the location 0, that in location 4. What's the assembler is going to do during assembly time? The memory address 0 is going to be loaded into the location counter, just like we did there. And then this instruction essentially is going to be translated into hexadecimal values. So it's a load word from register 1, we'd have 8C, 0, 0, 4, 0, 0, 0, 8. Just 8. It's done the translation, the location counter is then incremented by 4. So now the assembler knows that the next instruction to be translated is at the memory location 4, which is this instruction. So what it does, it fetches this instruction and translates it into hex again. And this one's going to be 2, 0, 4, 4, 0, 0, 0, 1. That's right, 2, 4, 6. Yep, that should be correct. After it's done that operation, it increments the counter again by 4, and now the value is 8. And now the assembler knows that the next instruction to be translated is at location 008, so it's going to be this location. And so on and so forth. So it just keeps going until it hits the stop or hold or runs out of memory. And yeah, essentially that's the same thing that program counter does, only from a bit of a different perspective. As the program counter will load the address value, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It will read the instruction and execute it, and then increment the value by 4. So they're very closely related. And to summarize now, so location counter keeps track of memory addresses of the current instruction being translated into hexadecimal or machine code. Now, the only difference between the location counter and the program counter is that the program counter is actually used by the processor and it's used during the execution of the program. Now, the similarities, by default, they start from 0, increment by 4, and the way they're used is very closely related to the fetch cycle. So you get the memory location loaded, fetch the instruction, translate it, and then increment the memory location by 4, so that the assembler knows now that the next instruction to be translated is at the next address, which is 004, 008, 00C, and so on and so forth. Thank you for your attention.